We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and...
King Charles believed he understood every secret buried beneath the royal household, until one sealed chamber proved him wrong. Behind an unmarked door connected to the Queen Mother's private estate records, the king discovered a hidden vault containing jewelry inventories, handwritten instructions, private correspondence, and one document bearing Princess Beatrice's name. Within hours, Charles ordered a private confrontation that would shake the York family and reopen wounds the palace had spent decades trying to bury. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles stepped through the service corridor with only a senior archivist beside him, his silence growing heavier with every locked panel. The hidden chamber had never appeared in the palace's modern inventory, and that omission mattered because anything excluded from the official record could survive beyond royal oversight. When the archivist removed a wooden board and revealed the entrance, the monarch understood that someone had protected this secret for years. The first metal case changed everything. Inside lay records belonging to the Queen Mother's private collection, meaning jewelry, letters, and instructions held outside the crown jewels, the ceremonial objects owned by the sovereign officially. These private possessions could be passed through family arrangements instead. Charles opened a file, found a handwritten page naming Beatrice, and stopped. His face hardened. He placed the document down without a word. Then the register exposed betrayal. A recent signature matched Beatrice's name, proving the vault had not remained untouched, while one object listed in the original inventory was missing. According to a documented account prepared by the archivist, the king closed the inventory box sharply, pushed back his chair, and ordered an aide to contact her immediately. Anger had entered the room before he gave it a voice. Beatrice received the summons at once. Charles believed the evidence showed she had known about the chamber and entered it without informing him, but the mystery widened when he found a sealed envelope addressed to the eldest daughter of the Duke of York. The wording suggested a private line of inheritance, deliberately created outside the monarch's control. That possibility made the missing object more than a family dispute. It made it a challenge to authority. By the time Beatrice reached Windsor Castle, the rules had already been set. Her father would not be allowed inside the room, the princess would face the king alone, and an aide warned her that he already knew what she had removed. But before Beatrice could defend what she had done, Charles needed to understand why the Queen Mother had placed such a dangerous responsibility in her hands. This was never simply a dispute over a locked room or a missing royal object. For Charles, the vault represented control, duty, and the painful possibility that his own family had acted around him. For Beatrice, it represented something far more intimate, a final connection to a royal matriarch whose private wishes had survived long after her death. When they faced one another, they were not only king and princess, they were two relatives carrying very different versions of loyalty. Beatrice sat outside the private sitting room, folding and unfolding her hands until her fingers began to ache. She understood why the summons mattered, yet fear was not the only emotion tightening inside her. The princess felt wounded. Charles had already judged the secret entry as betrayal, without hearing why she had entered the chamber or what she had been told to protect. Charles stood inside with the vault register open before him. He had always believed the monarchy survived through order, written authority, and a clear chain of responsibility. The sovereign, the reigning king or queen who holds the crown's formal authority, could not protect the institution if family members created hidden systems beyond that authority. To him, the vault was not merely forgotten history. It was proof that royal decisions had been made around him. Beatrice carried a different burden. As Prince Andrew's eldest daughter and a granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, she belonged deeply to the family, but remained outside its central working structure. She held no daily role directing the monarchy's public duties, which made private family legacies feel more personal, not less. The sapphire brooch she had removed was small, but its connection to the Queen Mother gave it emotional weight far beyond its size. Then her phone vibrated. Andrew's message contained only 4 words. Does he know everything? Beatrice read it twice. Her father's question confirmed what Charles already feared, that the missing brooch was only one part of the secret. She locked the screen without replying, but the silence did nothing to protect her. Inside, the king studied the second mark in the register. A faint name had been partially erased beside Beatrice's signature, suggesting someone from the old royal household had guided her to the chamber. His anger shifted. He remembered her as a child, laughing freely at family gatherings. Yet now he faced the possibility that she had concealed royal property while the York household was already under fierce public scrutiny. Charles ordered staff to retrieve records from one particular ceremony held years earlier. That gathering, according to a documented note found among the old household papers, was where Beatrice had first received a whispered instruction about the hidden room. The brooch mattered. The sealed letter mattered more. The answer lay years earlier, in a quiet royal ceremony where a single whispered instruction set the entire crisis in motion. The secret did not begin with a broken lock. It began with a promise made beneath the sound of chapel bells. Years before Charles entered the hidden vault, Beatrice attended a private family remembrance where an elderly former lady-in-waiting quietly delivered a message preserved from the Queen Mother's household. What appeared to be a sentimental exchange became the trigger for everything that followed, placing Beatrice on a path she believed was sacred, and Charles would later regard as unforgivably reckless. Beatrice had arrived at the Royal Chapel of All Saints, expecting grief, prayer, and quiet family memories. The private memorial gathered only a small circle of relatives and former royal household staff to honor women who had served earlier generations of the monarchy. A lady-in-waiting was a trusted female companion who assisted a senior royal with personal and ceremonial duties, often becoming a keeper of private confidence as well as tradition. Margaret Ellison watched the service from the edge of the gathering. The elderly former assistant had served within the Queen Mother's household and had carried one final responsibility for years. According to a documented account later prepared for the palace archive, she believed the message could be given only to Beatrice because the princess stood closest to the family branch named in the sealed instruction. Margaret moved when the ceremony ended. She guided Beatrice towards a side corridor, lowered her voice, and said, "Your great-grandmother feared this would be forgotten." The princess assumed she was about to receive a letter or sentimental keepsake. Instead, the former assistant pressed a cold brass key into her hand and closed her fingers around it. Then the warning came. Margaret explained through a recorded statement preserved by an old household secretary that a sealed instruction waited inside a forgotten Windsor vault. The chamber was to be opened only when the York daughters faced the loss of their family standing. Those words connected the secret directly to Andrew's troubles and to the fear that Beatrice and her sister could lose the final privileges linking them to royal life. Beatrice froze when another relative approached. Margaret refused to repeat the message and walked away, leaving the princess with a key she could neither explain nor forget. From that moment, loyalty became a trap. Informing Charles might have protected royal order, yet she feared palace officials would take control before the Queen Mother's wishes could even be understood. Months later, Beatrice learned that senior advisors were reviewing the York family's remaining privileges. She believed the condition had finally been met. Without warning the king, she used the key, entered the chamber, and found a letter that made waiting feel more dangerous than acting. Now, seated across from Charles with the key no longer hidden, Beatrice would have to explain why she trusted a message from the dead more than the authority of the living king. The door closed, the aides withdrew, and the king finally asked the question Beatrice had feared from the moment she received his summons. Charles did not begin with the missing brooch. He began with trust. Across a small table at Windsor, he demanded to know why she had entered a concealed royal chamber, removed an object, and kept silent, while palace officials unknowingly reviewed the same estate. Beatrice's answer transformed his anger into something far more personal. Charles had deliberately excluded advisors, lawyers, and Andrew from the meeting. He wanted no prepared defense and no family pressure shaping what Beatrice said. The king placed the vault register, copied inventory, and sealed envelope on the table between them. An estate inventory was the formal written record of objects belonging to a royal household or private collection, and every page before her made one truth painfully clear: denial was no longer possible. Charles removed his glasses and set them beside the documents. "You should have come to me," he said quietly. The softness of his voice carried more force than anger. Beatrice gripped the edge of her chair and replied that she had feared he would treat everything as institutional property before listening to the woman who had left it. To her, the Queen Mother's instruction was not simply paperwork. It was a promise passed through generations. The accusation cut deeper when Charles asked whether she had acted to protect her father. Beatrice's control broke. She insisted Andrew had never entered the vault, and accused the monarch of viewing every York decision through the shadow of scandal. Her father's damaged standing had already changed how the family treated them, she said, and now even an act of loyalty was being judged as deception. Then Beatrice admitted the truth. She had taken the sapphire brooch because the hidden letter instructed her to give it to Eugenie during a future family crisis. Princess Eugenie, her younger sister, stood beside her within the York branch, but carried her own separate place in royal life. The message warned that one daughter would need to protect what the other could not. Charles leaned forward and asked whether Beatrice understood that withholding royal material could permanently destroy his trust in her. She answered that the brooch held something absent from the inventory, a concealed compartment containing a miniature folded note. Even the king had not known it existed. The room changed instantly. Charles demanded the brooch be returned before anyone else opened it. Beatrice looked down, then delivered the answer he feared most. It was no longer in her possession. Eugenie had already received it. Yet the confrontation was no longer about whether Beatrice had crossed a line. It was about who possessed the authority to decide what the Queen Mother's final wishes truly meant. Once the vault was opened, power moved quickly through the palace, but not always in the direction Charles expected. Lawyers argued ownership, archivists defended preservation, family members invoked blood, memory, and private promises. At the center stood the king, forced to choose between his legal authority and the possibility that the Queen Mother had intentionally placed part of her legacy beyond the crown's control. Every answer threatened to wound someone he could not simply dismiss as an opponent. Charles convened a restricted review with the keeper of the royal archives, a private solicitor, and one trusted household official. The royal archives are the protected records preserving the monarchy's official and private history, while the royal collection contains art, jewelry, and objects held for the sovereign and future generations. The vault complicated everything, because some items belonged to the crown, some sat within that collection, and others had been privately owned. The legal difference became the first battlefield. Crown property served the monarchy and could not be treated like an ordinary family possession. Privately owned objects, however, could pass through personal instructions or inheritance. The sapphire brooch fell into that second category, but the note hidden inside it created a darker problem. Sensitive family information could still require royal protection even when the object carrying it belonged to Eugenie. Beatrice waited in a separate room as strangers debated her future. She believed the decision was being made about her instead of with her, and fear slowly hardened into defiance. When an official warned that she might lose access to family archive areas, the princess answered that punishment would not erase the Queen Mother's wishes. She had crossed a line, but she refused to accept that loyalty and betrayal were the same thing. Charles remained alone after the review, and read the handwritten instruction again. Secrecy angered him, yet the tenderness shown towards the York sisters unsettled him more. The Queen Mother had written of protecting two young women from suffering created by decisions they had not made. For the king, those words turned a legal question into a family wound. Then the archivist delivered another discovery through a documented archive report. Several pages had been removed from the Queen Mother's household diary during the same month the chamber was sealed. The missing note might complete that broken record, meaning Eugenie now carried evidence capable of changing the entire interpretation of the vault. Charles reached for the restriction order. He hesitated, then pressed his signature firmly across the page, blocking Beatrice from royal archive areas with immediate effect. At that same moment, Eugenie was already traveling towards Windsor with the sapphire brooch and its concealed message. The king had taken control of the vault, but the one object capable of changing his decision was already moving toward the castle. By the time Princess Eugenie reached Windsor, the secret had already divided the family into those who defended duty and those who defended memory. Beatrice had lost access to the archives. Charles had placed the vault under guard. Andrew was demanding answers from outside the room. Then Eugenie arrived carrying the sapphire brooch in a small velvet case, unaware that the note hidden inside it could either clear her sister or expose a truth the monarchy had deliberately kept silent. Charles had moved quickly. The hidden chamber was photographed, catalogued, sealed under royal authority, and placed under 24-hour security while ownership was reviewed. Royal authority meant the king's formal power to protect property, records, and material connected to the crown until advisors decided who legally controlled it. No one could enter now without written permission, including Beatrice. Beatrice stood motionless when the suspension notice was placed in her hands. The document removed her access to archive areas immediately, and the punishment struck harder than she expected. She looked at Charles and asked whether he now considered her dishonest. The king did not answer at once, which hurt more than anger. For her, silence sounded like judgment already delivered. Andrew demanded a private briefing, but Charles refused. He would not allow the dispute to become another confrontation between brothers, or let their history overpower the question before them. The monarch insisted that the focus remain on Beatrice's decision, yet her father's exclusion only deepened the York family's fear that the palace had already chosen its side. Eugenie entered carrying the velvet case and reacted sharply when guards asked her to surrender it. She placed it on the table, but kept one hand over the lid. Turning to Beatrice, she said her sister should never have carried the burden alone. Beatrice admitted she had been trying to protect her from the scandal, not pull her into it. Charles promised he would read the message before making a final judgment. Only then did Eugenie slowly remove her fingers. When the brooch was opened, the miniature note contained only half a statement. Its surviving words warned that one branch of the family might someday be judged for the failures of one man. The message made clear that the inheritance had been intended to protect both sisters' dignity separately from Andrew's reputation. Then the final line changed everything. It referred to another sealed statement hidden beneath a false base inside the vault. Charles immediately ordered the chamber reopened. Beatrice stepped forward before the command could be carried out, and asked for one private conversation first. With the second statement only moments away from discovery, Beatrice made one final request that forced Charles to meet her not as sovereign and subject, but as uncle and niece. For the first time since the crisis began, there were no lawyers, no archivists, and no documents arranged like weapons between them. Charles and Beatrice stood alone inside a smaller Windsor room, stripped of the formal distance that had protected them from saying what they truly felt. She did not ask him to ignore her mistake. She asked him to understand why she had made it. His response would decide whether the vault destroyed their trust or revealed something still worth saving. Charles agreed to 10 private minutes before the false base was opened. He lifted the suspension notice from the table, turned it face down, and signaled that the judgment was no longer final. A suspension notice was the formal order, temporarily removing Beatrice's access to protected royal records, but in that moment, it also represented something more painful, the belief that she could not be trusted. Beatrice began without excuses. She explained that the Queen Mother's instruction had reached her during a period when both York sisters feared their identities would be reduced forever to Andrew's public downfall. Eugenie had carried the same burden, yet neither woman had caused the scandal that followed their father. Beatrice wanted proof that an older generation had seen them as individuals, not as extensions of one damaged man. Her voice broke when she admitted why she entered the chamber. She was tired of inheriting shame she had not created. The vault, the letter, and the brooch had seemed like evidence that someone within the family had understood that pain long before it became public. Charles listened, then confessed his own failure. He had interpreted her silence as another attempt to force him into protecting Andrew. The king realized that suspicion had made him judge Beatrice's motive before hearing her fear. He told her she had been wrong to conceal the chamber, but he had been wrong to decide what her secrecy meant. Then Beatrice revealed the promise. According to a recorded conversation preserved by Margaret Ellison's former secretary, she had sworn never to surrender the brooch until Eugenie read the hidden message. Her silence had not been designed to deceive Charles. It had been an exact attempt to honor the instruction. Charles opened the false base with Beatrice beside him. The complete statement confirmed that the Queen Mother intended the brooch and a modest private trust to belong jointly to both sisters, protected from any claim made through Andrew. A private trust was a legal arrangement holding money or property for named beneficiaries, separate from the father's control. The king decided there would be no public punishment, yet the palace still needed an official response, and rumors were already escaping Windsor. Their private understanding had begun to repair the family wound, but outside Windsor's walls, the discovery was already becoming a national spectacle. By sunrise, the secret vault was no longer a private royal crisis. It was the image dominating Britain. Newspapers spoke of hidden inheritance, fractured trust, and a confrontation inside Windsor. Broadcasters debated whether Beatrice had protected family history or defied the king. Yet one specific moment outside the castle transformed the story. Two sisters arriving together beneath a wall of cameras, refusing to let scandal separate them before the palace delivered its judgment. Rumors had begun with small details. Extra security appeared near the archive entrance, and Beatrice's scheduled public engagement was suddenly postponed without explanation. Those changes mattered, because royal schedules are usually controlled carefully, and even a minor alteration can suggest trouble behind palace walls. Reporters quickly connected the cancellation to the growing activity at Windsor. The palace prepared a restrained statement confirming that previously uncatalogued private possessions linked to the Queen Mother had been discovered and placed under review. Uncatalogued meant the items had not been formally listed in the official records, leaving their ownership and history uncertain. The wording avoided blame, but the silence around Beatrice only made suspicion spread faster. Beatrice felt the pressure before she left the castle. She asked Eugenie whether she had damaged the family name they had been trying to protect. The fear in her voice was no longer about punishment. It was about becoming another symbol of York disgrace. Eugenie took her sister's hand and told her the secrecy had caused the crisis. But love, not greed, had caused the decision. That reassurance carried Beatrice forward. A small crowd had gathered near the long walk, where reporters waited for any sign of movement. When the sisters appeared together, the shouting briefly faded. They paused for 1 second, then continued side by side, refusing to let the public story divide them. Within minutes, the photograph was everywhere. One national broadcaster called the discovery a battle between royal authority and a grandmother's final promise, turning a private dispute into a debate about who owned family history. A newspaper placed the image across its front page beneath the headline, "The Sisters, the King, and the Secret Vault." Charles saw the coverage and understood that silence could no longer protect anyone. The public had already chosen its symbol, two daughters standing together beneath the weight of their father's scandal and the Queen Mother's final promise. Then the palace confirmed that the king would personally issue the ruling on Beatrice's status and the inheritance. The public had chosen its symbol, but only Charles could deliver the verdict that would determine whether the hidden vault became a story of betrayal or reconciliation. Charles's final decision did not excuse Beatrice, but neither did it destroy her. After days of anger, legal scrutiny, and painful family truths, the king reached a verdict that acknowledged both the authority of the crown and the private wishes of the Queen Mother. The vault would be preserved, the inheritance would be honored, and the princess who had concealed its existence would face consequences shaped not by humiliation, but by the understanding both of them had nearly lost. Charles ordered the physical chamber sealed permanently beneath Royal Archives protection. The Royal Archives are the secure records preserving documents and objects connected to the monarchy's history, ensuring that no private relative could remove anything else without formal approval. Every letter, diary fragment, and inventory would now be catalogued, allowing the family to protect the past without hiding it again. The king also confirmed that the sapphire brooch and private trust belong jointly to Beatrice and Eugenie. A private trust is a legal arrangement that holds property or money for named people, separate from another relative's control. The ownership would be recorded transparently, fulfilling the Queen Mother's written intention while preventing Andrew, or anyone acting through him, from making a future claim. Beatrice still faced consequences. Charles issued a formal reprimand for entering the chamber without permission, and temporarily removed her independent archive access. Yet he made one point unmistakably clear. He did not consider her disloyal. She had acted wrongly, but she had acted from fear, family pain, and a promise she believed she was honoring. Beatrice apologized during their final private meeting, without defending the secrecy. She admitted that trust could not survive when truth was withheld. Charles accepted her words, and confessed that leadership became cruel when suspicion replaced listening. The monarch had protected royal order, but he had nearly sacrificed compassion before understanding what the hidden statement truly meant. The complete message revealed no plot against the crown, and no secret fortune designed to weaken the king. Its purpose was deeply human. The Queen Mother had wanted two young women protected from carrying the permanent burden of their father's choices. Charles ordered the missing diary pages preserved beside the statement, creating one complete record of both the love and discomfort the family had once tried to separate. Then the king returned the brass key to Beatrice, inside a sealed presentation box. It was not permission to reopen the vault. It was recognition that she had carried a promise she never fully understood. She thanked him, accepted the box, and left without fear. What began as a hidden chamber and an act of secrecy ended as something the monarchy rarely allows itself to become: an honest reckoning in which duty remained firm, love survived judgment, and the Queen Mother's final wish was honored with dignity. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.